Lovely. Thank you all so much for attending our first CA meeting of the new year, 2025, and a bright future for our region this next year. Now, there's a couple of new faces around our table. Simon Pope, give us a wave. There you are. Director of Transport Capital Projects, and Damon Lawrence, Interim Director of Finance. You are very, very welcome to the Combined Authority. So before we get into today's briefing, if you don't mind, I'd just like to acknowledge that John Prescott is being laid to rest in Hull today. I would have definitely been there had we not had our important CA meeting. And I know that the thoughts of everyone around the table are with his friends and family. I didn't know John that well. I went campaigning with him a few times, but he was an icon for the Labour movement, and his commitment to Yorkshire and the North was inspiring. And for a working class politician, he really did lead the way. A true political heavyweight who really did care about, genuinely cared about regional inequalities, fighting for social justice and protecting the environment. His legacy lives on in how we're approaching devolution now, and I know he would have championed the approach that the government is now taking. So now we turn to the agenda. Miles, any apologies, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As you've noted, Councillor Morley's attending as sub for Councillor Jeffrey, who's given her apologies, and apologies from Mandy Rudyard.
Thank you so much. And item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare on any item on the agenda? No, thank you so much. Moving on. Item 3. Now, officers have advised that the information contained in appendices 1, 2 and 3 to agenda item 6, bus franchising, are treated as exempt under paragraph 3 of part 1 to schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as they contain information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the Combined Authority, and further that it's considered that the public interest in maintaining the content of the appendices as exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information as publication could prejudice current and future decision making. If we're in agreement, the press and public will be excluded should members wish to discuss the content of the appendices when we consider items 6. And I'm assuming that people would want to discuss those appendices, so we will. I'm assuming we all take the view that we will do that in private. Lovely, thank you so much. So we are recommending that the information is exempt. Item 4, minutes of the 12th of December. Any comments or questions on the minutes of the meeting 12th of December last year? No, thank you. Are we content to confirm these as an accurate record? We are. Super. Okie dokie. So moving on to the Mayor's update. I want to start my update by acknowledging the successful reopening of Bradford Interchange, finally, on the 5th of January. The snow and ice absolutely did its best to stop us, but thanks to the hard work of colleagues, the bus station did open as planned. I know the previous 12 months has been really difficult for the people of Bradford, and I want to thank them again for their patience in what has been a really difficult period. And also thanks to the staff, both at the CA and Bradford Council, who worked tirelessly to get the station reopened. I know that the travelling public are incredibly grateful for all the hard work, and I did message the Mayor on the day, and the BBC had loads of vox pops from the travelling public, and it was seemingly uniformly pleasing to hear that people were delighted it was open. Also, it would be remiss of me not to comment on the opening of Bradford City of Culture at the start of this month, and I am proudly wearing the scarf. It was an incredible event with 10,000 people braving the bitter cold in Centenary Square, and a fitting opening to what I know is going to be an incredible year of events. And I know everybody around this table will be heading to Bradford this year. And if not, I want to know why. When we last met on the 12th of December, the English devolution white paper hadn't yet been published. An update follows later in the agenda, but I was delighted that the government chose to launch it here in West Yorkshire. I genuinely think it's a significant moment for both our region and our country, with more powers, greater flexibilities over funding, and powers being transferred from Whitehall into communities. I'm really looking forward to being able to discuss the details shortly, but I know that we're all looking forward to having greater control over our region's future. Immediately after the last meeting, I travelled up to Darlington to take part in a roundtable with the Chancellor and other mayors to discuss the government's growth mission and how we pursue local growth. A very productive conversation. We agreed to continuing exploring further fiscal devolution. We also discussed engagement with the spending review, which I understand is now being confirmed for the 11th of June. Doesn't feel like spring to me, but maybe that's their parliamentary calendar. Each combined authority has been allocated a senior Treasury civil servant as a body to help with this process. Definitely an improvement on the previous ways of working. And we're, of course, working with departments on their spending review submissions while developing our own, and we'll keep members informed. Finally, last week, the second Mayor's Council took place in Sheffield. The Council is chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister and provides a space for partnership discussions between mayors and government. And the agenda is co-developed with mayors, and this time had in attendance the Employment Minister to discuss the Get Britain Working Plan and the National Child Poverty Action Plan. We also discussed the English Devolution White Paper and the role of local growth plans with the Minister for Devolution, the Minister for Local Growth, and the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. And the next meeting of the Council will take place in May. I also gave evidence in front of the Select Committee, MHCLG Select Committee, about devolution with Louise from the LGA, and made the case that that we will succeed here in West Yorkshire if devolution is deepened with greater freedoms and flexibilities. That's all I wanted to update you on, so let's move on to the next item. Item 6. Oh, please, yes. Apologies, I didn't see you.
Sorry, no need to apologise. I'm a little surprised you didn't make mention of the Leeds General Infirmary and the government's decision around that, given the agenda is growth. The single biggest thing that would help Leeds and West Yorkshire would be the government committing to get on with delivering the LGI and the innovation arc and all of the jobs and impact on the health sector that would come with that. So what is the plan for this combined authority? My proposal is we shouldn't take it lying down, either as councils or as a combined authority. We should say the decision's wrong, call the government out, and what can we do through your influence in government to get this right. Rachel Reeves is supposed to be part of Team Leeds. It feels like she's abandoned us on this one.
Well, I would beg to differ that our Chancellor has abandoned Leeds, and certainly you'll have seen yesterday her commitment to mass transit, which is absolutely pivotal for growth. And so I would disagree with you, if I may, on it is the hospital is the one single thing that's going to deliver growth. I disagree. I think mass transit is the one single thing. Now, of course, it was disappointing that the data's been pushed further down the line, but as you can imagine, we're having private conversations to ensure that we do get a good outcome, but we're also investing in the wet labs, and also the innovation arc is not impacted because we still have that investment money, and we're going to be turbocharging that investment for the City of Leeds. But Ben, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to the Mayor's comments, that we are talking to both colleagues in Leeds City Council and to the other partners involved in the innovation arc, both on the health side and the university side, to look at what the options are to ahead of the successful development of the hospital, to kind of look at what the opportunities are in the interim period. And we're looking to hopefully say some things publicly about that very soon.
Thank you. Any further comments? Super. If we can move on to item 6, bus franchising. The paper in front of us takes stock of where we are with implementing our bus franchising scheme, a landmark decision taken in March 24. It's a big step forward for our region, and this update is all about making sure we're on track and ready for the next stages. We know this isn't a simple process. Things like sorting the lotting, depots and branding are critical to getting this right. The details in the report lay out a clear approach, aiming to drive competition and deliver the best possible services for West Yorkshire. I'm really encouraged by the progress so far, a testament to the hard work of our teams and the strong partnerships we've built to make this happen. This scheme is a game changer for public transport in our region. Today's discussion is an important step in ensuring that we get it spot on. Before we move forward, I'd like to remind everyone that Appendix 1, 2 and 3 contain exempt information, and as we've agreed, anyone who would like to discuss that, we will stop the recording. First, can I invite Councillor Hinchcliffe, as Chair of the Transport Committee, to provide any comments before passing on to Simon Warburton, our Executive Director of Transport, to provide further detail on the recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think it just shows from the paper, and obviously we're discussing other things in the private session as well, how much work has already been done on this. We have a lot to do now to get ready for franchising, and we have, and obviously not just with the bus operators and moving to a different model, but also to make sure that people realise what the network is like, and the branding is obviously part of that as well. Obviously trying to do this as cheaply as possible as well, which I know is a prime concern for yours. So I'm happy to move over to Simon for more detailed explanation of the front end of this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon.
Thank you very much. If I can just spend a few minutes taking members through the public paper. So since the decision was taken in March 2024 to introduce a defined scheme for franchising in West Yorkshire, we have been undertaking a substantial body of work to prepare in particular for the first franchising tranche, against which we intend to issue invitations to tender in October of this year, and then looking ahead to the full rollout of the programme through to late 2028. The work has followed the framework that we set out for members and discussed at the Combined Authority meeting in July. But since then, we have continued to develop the work with a particular focus on how we prioritise activity within each of the work streams to ensure our readiness across three timeframes that we start to discuss from paragraph 3.4 of the report. So the first of those three phases focuses on ensuring that we have our core contracting regime right, recognising that tranche 1 will then establish the conditions for the two further tranches that follow. A second phase is then focused on ensuring that we've achieved all of the milestones and all of the preparation necessary for the first operation, so the operation of tranche 1 from March 2027. And then a final phase that enables us to embed all of the arrangements that will be needed to be ready for us to act as a full franchising authority from 2028, and to enable us to work at scale across what becomes an overlapping process across the three tranches. In organising ourselves this way, we can ensure that we have our teams and funds best focused throughout the programme, but critically also that members can be clearly cited on the key decisions that will need to be taken. And that's enormously important, recognising the central importance of public accountability in all that we do in the case for franchising that was agreed. With this in mind, and recognising that this programme will touch travel in all parts of the conurbation and involves a process of change that none of us have previously undertaken within West Yorkshire, we recommend that a specific shadow board be established to provide more detailed oversight and guidance, accountable guidance for the process. As the report section from 3.9 onwards then shows, we've made very positive progress since we last reported in July, and we're now ready to present the first group of recommendations to the Combined Authority for decision today. So from paragraph 3.18, we set out our approach to organising the franchising lots within the tranches, with further detail provided in an exempt appendix. And it is exempt so as to allow us to bring that final approach forward to the market in a way that fits with our franchising scheme. and we are seeking delegated authority to complete the introduction of this approach following discussion and comments from members today. From 3.22, we set out the approach to the acquisition of depots, as was set out in the original case, in a timely manner, so that we can ensure their readiness in the process. And again, further detail is set out in exempt appendices reflecting the commercial nature of this decision. And again, we will then be seeking, subject to members' discussion, authority to proceed against this depot strategy. And then finally, from 3.30, we set out the importance of defining a branding approach to the future network and the customer assets approaches that will follow through franchise specification. Work is underway on this, as set out in the report. And what we're seeking at this stage is approval for the gradual retirement of the Metro brand and for members' support for us to progress towards a new brand to be brought forward in the spring. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Anybody wish to comment? Councillor Scullion, and then Councillor Lewis, and then Councillor Lamb. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will try very hard not to stray on to the exempt items. And I know we're not focusing on local issues, but I just wanted to say I really welcome the shadow board, because I think we've really got a part to play in shaping bus services. And more than that, we've got a part to play in increasing the accountability of local bus services in terms of performance. And I want to be able to say and begin to say to residents that, you know, we are turning this around, actually, and we're turning around the decline that we see. And I'll use Calderdale example in terms of First Bus, the Upper Valley, and the decline that we've seen in services there. It's a really beautiful place, Calderdale, but if you have to stand and look at it for an extra hour because the bus doesn't turn up, I'm afraid that beauty pales a bit. But the shadow board is really, really welcome. We must make sure that actually we are keeping a close eye on those services, filling those gaps, but really we need to be shaping those services and making sure there's proper accountability for performance, because this can't go on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks. I had an opportunity to enjoy the beauty of Kippocks this morning because my bus didn't turn up, and I think it is really underlines the point I'm sure Councillor Morley will feel over the border in Wakefield is some of our bus companies at the moment aren't performing, and franchising is really welcome in terms of having that long-term solution. But at the moment, you know, we've got services, we've got timetables that have been thinned out recently, and then even the, what's printed in the timetable doesn't turn up. So just as Councillor Scullion says, having that focus now with our oversight on the bus network now and how we move into franchising, I think it's a really important part of this paper, and I think it is important that that's picked up on this item.
Thank you so much. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It'd be remiss of me, obviously, not to point out the obvious that I'm a franchising sceptic, as you know. However, on this issue, I very much hope I'm wrong and you're all proven right, because we all want to see better buses, as has been outlined. We want more reliability, better services. The decision is made, so we have to make the best of it now. A few questions. I don't think I'm straying into the appendixes. I'm speaking in broad terms. So on the shadow board, is there an intention to stick with the spirit of how we work around this table and have cross-party representation on that shadow board? That would be the first question. The second point I'd have is there's an awful lot of detail in this paper, and I don't pretend to have got my head around every dot on every I and every cross on every T. But what is apparent is that a lot of it is predicated on a significant increase in bus patronage, which would buck the current trend. And also, in broad terms, the finances, by necessity, are very unpredictable at this moment in time. There's a huge range of what the cost could be. And I think it's important to set out early what the hierarchy would be in terms of, if we need more money, where's it going to come from? Are we going to ask councils to dig deeper into the transport levy? Are we going to ask exclusively fare payers to pay more if that was necessary? Are we going to be looking to a mayoral precept if there's not enough money in the kitty, or would it be a commitment to say, well, it's a high priority for the combined authority, so we would need to do less of other things? Because the risk, it seems to me, is I believe we're suggesting we'd need to get 130% uplift in patronage versus 2018, when the direction of travel is in the opposite direction. And my final point is there's a lot of technical stuff in here, and maybe discussed in the private session, but from the point of view of our residents and passengers, the thing they want to know is what's the practical effects that they're going to see in their lives. When can they expect to see better buses? When can they be more confident the bus will turn up? I have the same experience in my ward where we're on an hourly frequency and it frequently doesn't turn up. And I mean, I'd love to spend 2 hours in Wetherby. You've found plenty to do, but if you're trying to get into Leeds, it doesn't help you. So I really hope this does work, but I think it's important in this public session that we're here for the benefit of residents. When can they expect to see better buses? How many more services do we expect to see? When will the reliability improve? Because in essence, all this technical detail is great, but that's what they want to know. Is my bus going to turn up? And is it going to get me where I want to go? And will it be affordable?
Thank you so much. A number of questions there. Simon.
Thank you very much. So, firstly, to reassure members, as we've noted in paragraph 3.15, it is our intention that we would apply membership of the Shadow Board across the mayor and representation of the political leadership of the 5 West Yorkshire authorities, as is common with our general approach to arrangements around the combined authority. So yes, we are expecting that there would be multi-party representation on the Shadow Board. With regard to funding, so the critical aspect is to disaggregate two elements. So as we have given assurance consistently through the case for franchising, we are able to manage across to a franchised regime at a balanced cost, and we set out, and the combined authority agreed at the time that the one funding decision within that would be an additional 2% within the transport levy going forwards as part of that funding strategy, recognising a set of costs that we predict will present themselves agnostic of regime. Clearly, there is an ambition for the combined authority, both in meeting climate change objectives, but also in meeting wider growth and social inclusion benefits, for us to extend the reach of the bus network through the franchising scheme. That will ultimately be subject to a series of commercial matters that will play themselves out as we take ourselves through the franchising process over the next 2 to 3 years. So what I can't say at this stage is what will be all of the commercial implications associated with that, but what we will continue to do as we bring ever greater detailed decisions forward based around the plan that was agreed, is to reassure you that any decisions that are required will be taken here, and you will have full sight of all of the information that drives the costs, which is a difference to the position that you have found yourselves in historically, where we have not been able to furnish you with all of the costs through a deregulated environment. Within our plan, there is already a commitment that we will have a fleet investment approach, and I'm looking to bring as part of that forward plan a fleet strategy forward to the Combined Authority in the next few months, again in a timely fashion, to inform the invitation to tender. So we will be able to set out more clearly for you at that stage our advice in terms of expectations of scale and pace. But the intention is that moves forward from the first tranche. With regard to performance, again, what we are able to guarantee from day one of a franchise is we will then have access to all of the data associated with performance, and there is work that's underway at the moment within the network management work stream that we talk about within the report to ensure that we are ready to be able to use the data to drive improved performance. And with regard to how many additional services, again, as we move into a process of contract development and then contract negotiation with private sector bidders, we will be able to bring forward further advice in terms of what is the market telling us as to where we may be able to deliver service development. But clearly, until we've gone into that process, I can't give you that advice at this stage.
Thank you so much. Councillor Morley.
I was going to suggest, Councillor Lamb, if you was a sceptic, come to the Wakefield district and try and get around the district by bus. But listen to your own theories in what's happening in your own ward. You're already there, so I'm surprised you're not more, supporting what we're doing with franchising. We've seen our bus companies in the Wakefield district and South Leeds and North Kirklees reduce their services, reduce hours, and doing everything what we can do to make their buses more sustainable, but we're not seeing actually any proof, any statistics that these are working yet. It'd be interesting to know if that's coming forward about how the punctuality of these services are. It is mentioned in the report, though, and something that we've seen in the Wakefield district is they've amalgamated some of the school services. We've now got children having to go out, which could be a 20-minute journey over an hour to get to school, going out just before 7 o'clock on a morning. That's not acceptable. And then the same on the way back. That's unacceptable. We need to prioritise to make sure that kids are getting to school in a reasonable time, not taking a tour of the district to get there. Franchise just cannot come quick enough, Mayor. I like to be grumpy when it comes to buses, but you've heard this before, but for the Wakefield district, it just cannot come quick enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You've been a real advocate for franchising. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Just briefly, you don't seem to have set out a communication strategy in here for keeping the public informed and advised, because if we need to take the public with us. It doesn't matter whether we're for or against it. Whatever we do, we need to take the public, we need to take business with us. So we need to be sure, if you could set out a communication strategy. And the other thing in terms of challenge, I've not yet had the final discussions with the Chair of the Transport Committee and the Deputy Chair, but scrutiny is looking to work together, so agreeing what we'll each look into, so that we're challenging the process all the time and trying to work together, trying not to step on each other's toes, which is a possibility if the truth be told, because that would also give additional challenge and reassurance to the public. And so what I would say to the leaders of the councils, can you make sure that your people attend scrutiny in large numbers on these working groups so that they can feed in their challenges as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And just to support what you're saying, this is a really important time for our region. Councillors are very busy, but it's very important that councillors get on top of this detail. Otherwise, there will be no transparency and no scrutiny. So we're offering training and support and early papers and talk-throughs and sharing our knowledge so that people can get upskilled. And you can join me doing a PhD in bus franchising. And hopefully that councillors will also see this as an opportunity to add to their skill set, that then if they choose to do something else in the future, they could work in the bus industry, potentially. Thank you. Would you like to pick anything up, Simon, particularly about communications, public communications?
I think Councillor Anderson raises a really important point, and it's actually an early priority example of work that we would like to take through the shadow board to make sure that members are comfortable with the way in which we are communicating. You're absolutely right, Councillor Anderson. We need to be able to ensure that the public understand the work that is underway, because inevitably there are quite lengthy periods of time where we need to carry out commercial negotiations in private on your behalf, and we don't want to create a vacuum in the public domain.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, I just, gone on Councillor Anderson's point, and we've talked about this, I just think it's probably worth both committees sort of doing a bit of forward planning on this, about what we're going to look at. Obviously, we have a deadline, don't we? We know when it is. So working back from there, what we need to look at when, and probably just worth doing that. I know it's bureaucratic, but then it makes sure we're covering all points. So I think that's worth doing.
We'll take that away. Thank you. Good suggestion. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, how soon are you looking at having the shadow board set up and running?
Simon?
Very quickly, I need to work with our colleagues in committee services now for us to establish the membership of the board and move forward as quickly as possible. But yeah, we've got a pressing timescale, so within a matter of weeks, I would like to be able to convene.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go into private session and then we can discuss other sections of this item. So, Miles, if you would, for now, end the broadcast and briefly to each recommendation, and then we can approve as we go, if that's okay. All right, Miles, can we go back onto live streaming? Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. We are now, after that private session, back to open discussion, and we're going to take a view on the recommendations in the paper. So firstly, are members happy to note the updates in the report? Happy, thank you so much. Item 2, are we happy to approve the bus franchising lotting strategy appendix 1 and delegate authority to the chief executive in consultation with the mayor to progress? Great stuff, thank you. Item 3, are we happy to approve the bus franchising depot strategy appendix 2 to proceed through decision point 2, strategic outline case, and delegate authority to implement it, including depot acquisition? Happy to approve, thank you. Are we happy to approve £67 million worth of development funding to acquire and refurbish depots, progress zero emission infrastructure, and move to the next business case stages? We are. Marvellous. Are we happy to approve future depot related decisions via the assurance process outlined in Appendix 3? We are. And finally, can we endorse the retiring Metro identity and adopt a new transport network brand for West Yorkshire to be decided? We can. Thank you all so much. This is quite a moment for our region. It's really setting us on target to deliver our ambitious plans for franchising across the region. And as we've heard today, just hearing from councillors how they are desperate for a better service, and hopefully we know that this is heading us in the right direction for a better service for the people of West Yorkshire. So thank you all so much for your commitment, and thank you to the team for working so hard to get us to this point. Okay, moving on. Item 7, business planning and budget 25-26. This next item is our budget for 25-26. We're taking a slightly different approach this year by also seeking approval of multi-year outcomes and the 25-26 business plan alongside the budget. The reason for this is, as you know, deliver. We have to find ways where we can get things done more efficiently at speed. As the report highlights, despite a challenging financial landscape, our achievements this year underscore our commitment to delivering on our priorities, including skills, housing and sustainable transport. Included in the budget is details of the proposed transport levy, which we've kept flat for 10 years now because of the strain on council budgets. This does create pressures on the transport budget, which means there are difficult decisions to make over the course of next year. The solution to this is to franchise the bus network, ensuring we have full control of how the buses are run, which is, as we've just discussed, we're well on the way to deliver. In addition to this, we'll continue to progress getting spades in the ground on our mass transit system in 2028, and it was hugely welcome to hear the Chancellor reinstate the government's commitment to mass transit in her growth speech yesterday, and we'll continue to work alongside government to deliver on the promise of bringing trams back to our streets and opening up growth and regeneration opportunities. Over the course of the next year, we'll see the outcome of our initial route consultation and further details of the preferred routes that flow from that. When I was re-elected last year, I also committed to making West Yorkshire a region of learning. And the budget proposals contain our intention to introduce a universal skills system, which will enable everyone, whatever their age in the region, to fulfil their potential. We'll also continue to deliver on our flagship Home Energy West Yorkshire scheme, which helps households invest in insulation and renewable energy in their homes to help save on energy bills and reduce carbon emissions. Just a couple of examples of the things we're doing over the next year. As I've said, deliver, 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 and that is what I am going to continue to pursue through this budget. This will be the last budget we set as a combined authority ahead of the single settlement, which, as you know, I've been battling for since I became mayor, and we're going to receive that next year. We are approaching a new era for devolution, and there's so much work we need to do alongside government and partners between now and then, and we'll be committing the resources we need to make sure we maximise the benefit of a single settlement. We want to use these powers to grow our economy and ensure that people have more money in their pockets. We have ambitious plans for our region, and this budget will help us deliver that throughout the next year and beyond. So, can I now invite Damon Lawrenson, our Interim Director of Finance, to provide further detail on the paper. Thank you, Damon.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendations are as outlined in previous years. There's no real difference apart from the point that you're drawing out of it's an integrated approach to business planning. So we've tried to look at the medium-term financial plan. I'll just make reference to a couple of points in the report. In terms of 24-25, we're looking to outturn within budget. We've still got a small gap that we need to close, but with our forecasting and efficiency drive, we're looking to bring that budget home. The 25-6 budget is as outlined. It shows and demonstrates that we are managing some pressures that we've got in this year that will have rolled over into the following year. We've got some growth items that we're going to implement on a drawdown basis, and we've got some additional funding and some efficiencies that have balanced that budget. So whilst we're delivering a 25-26 balanced budget, we do know that there's a knock-on effect for 26, 27 and 27, 28. And those growth items that have been featured in the business planning materialise at a circa about 20 million in those years. So by implementing a drawdown process, we'll be challenging efficiencies, ways of working to mitigate those risks and carrying into 26, 27 and 27, 28. You mentioned the transport levy, and that's detailed. On the capital programme, we've illustrated the carrying position and also some significant investment programmes. The investment fund that has been detailed in the report that we're still working through, and also the impact on bus franchising. And with that, we need to really be looking at our treasury management, our cash flow forecasting, making sure that when we move from internal borrowing position to an external borrowing requirement, that we've got the right timing to execute that. In the report, you'll see the reserves position. We carry a general reserves balance of about 14 million, and that's based on risk. And we'll be reviewing that to make sure that's adequate over this medium term. There's earmarked reserves, and all the types of provisions are all detailed in the report, some of which are unusable, some of which you will see that are actually being used in the coming years. But we wanted to present a full picture on our reserves position, our revenue position, our capital position, and our treasury management position. In my statutory role, I've outlined the budget risks and the uncertainty. And I think over the coming years, what we will be doing as a team is looking at that medium-term financial plan and regularly reporting any updates on what is materialising as a result of that challenge. And I think finally, I would say that the work doesn't stop with this report. it commences, because we will be zero basing and doing line by line budget reviews to ensure that the base budget for 25-26 is in the right place and the impact is for 26-27 and 27A. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could take this opportunity as well, Dame, to say you're brand new to the organisation and you've definitely delivered a really robust paper on the budget and lots of reassurance that you're here to keep us safe, and I feel that you've done a great job so far, so thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would echo your comments, and I think Damon's really hit the ground running. Very impressed with the work that's been done so far. I'm particularly pleased to see the commitment to zero-based budgeting, which is something I've been advocating and banging my head against a brick wall for in our council for some time, and I hope Councillor Lewis might take note that that's something we should be doing in Leeds as well. A few issues to flag up. At the last Governance and Audit Committee, we couldn't sign the accounts off because we had a discrepancy of just over £850 million, which is quite a mistake to make. I think, one, it would be remiss not to mention it here and just get an update about it. I'm assured and reassured that it's an accounting fix that's needed. I don't want to alarm anybody that we're missing money. I'm absolutely assured about that. It will be rectified and move forward. The wider point is it highlights for me it was missed by internal audit, it was missed by external audit, and only flagged up very late in the day. And one of the concerns I have is that as we grow at pace as a combined authority, do we have solid foundations and the real capacity to be able to do all of the things that we're doing, and how big of a risk is that? And I won't jump the gun on anything that's going to be announced later, but staffing is a concern, and we are looking to recruit in a very small pool of people with an expanding number of combined authorities, and being able to get the right people with the right ability to do the things that we need to do is going to be a challenge as well. We've seen it repeatedly with recruitment, and so just getting that reassurance about what level of risk is there, that capacity might be an issue in delivering some of these projects and plans, and also having the capacity to oversee what we're doing, because my understanding is resourcing is one of the reasons why that £850 million accounting error was made, because we simply didn't have the capacity to oversee everything. So a few things in there, but impressive work. Welcome, Damon, but I just think we need to be alive to those risks and make sure we've got plans for them.
Thank you. And as you say, a large amount of money, but a small error in the scheme of things. And my understanding is double counting. But over to you, Damon.
So in May, June 2024, that's when the consolidation of the accounts takes place for the 23-24 year. The accounts for the combined authority were fine. The accounts for the police authority are fine. In fact, it doesn't reflect any issue with the accounting procedures or reporting of the West Yorkshire Police finances. It's when you bring those two entities together on a group consolidation basis, and then you report the consolidated picture. There were some errors, there was some double counted that needed to be removed. And rest assured, we're strengthening and reviewing the processes, the systems functionality. Since last May, June, we've recruited and strengthened the team, and will continue to do so. And finally, there'll be an update at the Governance and Audit Committee in a couple of weeks' time, where, if you like, the ins and outs should be adjusted, and then we're in a position to publish the statement of accounts. So it's not a material issue for the combined authority business. It's not a material issue for the police. It was on the consolidated group position. So we want to make sure that we're reporting the correct position. It is obviously an issue that is raised, but it's given us an opportunity to review our internal processes, making sure that we've got the right culture, make sure that we're proactive, and as you've pointed out, Councillor, making sure we've got the right resources at the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any further comments on the budget? No, thank you. Then, if we are happy, the report seeks approval of the draft 25-26 business plans in principle, the proposed 25-26 revenue budget, the indicative capital programme to 28-29, the transport levy for 25-26, and the Treasury management statement. Members, are we happy to approve? Lovely, thank you. Members are also asked to note the revised 24-25 revenue position and plans to revise the authority's approach to capitalisation of costs. Super. Moving on to the English Devolution White Paper. This was published on the 16th of December, marking a significant step forward in the government's approach to devolution across England. As I said earlier, it was an absolute privilege to host the launch here in West Yorkshire. Can I just take a moment to also acknowledge the hard work that's been put into this process? It's really clear that this is a transformative moment for West Yorkshire and for the country. And if you think to where we started to where we are in such a short amount of time, it's pretty phenomenal. And I'm grateful for the ongoing collaboration with government to bring these proposals to life. As set out in the report, the White Paper outlines a new direction for devolution, moving towards a devolution by default model. Massive opportunity for our region, allowing us to take greater control of transport, skills, housing, and really driving that economic growth. However, while the proposals are promising, there's still much work to be done to ensure that our priorities are fully reflected in the upcoming English Devolution Bill. Now, while we've made significant strides, it's important to recognise this is just the beginning. It's the floor, not the ceiling. And I'm confident that with continued collaboration and the right engagement, we can secure a devolution framework that will benefit West Yorkshire for decades to come. Can I now invite Sarah Eaton, our Director of Strategy, Communications and Intelligence, to talk us through the key points in the paper. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you outlined, the report provides an overview of the English Devolution White Paper, which was published in December, and kind of progress towards securing deeper devolution. So colleagues will be aware of previous reports that we've kind of brought outlining our ambitions in this particular area. The report also kind of sets out kind of our anticipated next steps for planning and implementation that obviously will need to progress throughout 2025. And as you said, Mayor, the White Paper looks to move to a position of devolution by default, and that is looking to both kind of deepen devolution but also widen devolution. So there's been a lot of reports nationally about what that might mean moving forward, where more areas are able to kind of secure kind of a devolution deal. So I don't intend to go through the whole of the report in any detail, but I'm just going to pick out a few highlights really, if I may. In terms of an overview, what the White Paper does is it creates a kind of a new devolution architecture, and that's the creation of strategic authorities, and they'll have certain responsibilities now which are enshrined in law. I think that's really linked to that that kind of ambition to kind of widen devolution. So what this is doing is kind of standardising kind of the approach across the country rather than having specific devolution deals that might have been agreed in specific places, which is obviously good news in terms of expanding this across the country. But what that does is kind of make sure that, depending upon the maturity of a particular organisation, it confirms, that there'll be different kind of status given to kind of emerging new and existing kind of mayoral strategic authorities. But just to confirm, West Yorkshire will receive that kind of established mayoral strategic authority status, and that's the deepest level of devolution available. That means we can unlock more powers and levers and perhaps areas that are starting to think about doing this in their particular patch. There's also a real link in the White Paper and intention to use new powers and levers to kind of drive growth, and that is linked to our ambitions that have been set out in our growth plan. And as part of that, there'll be a statutory requirement for all mayoral strategic authorities to produce a local growth plan, and we're one of the first areas to kind of do that, which puts us in a kind of a fantastic position to kind of really look at the White Paper through that lens. And obviously, what's really important around that is kind of the link into the local integrated settlement outcomes framework, and I'll come on to that in a little while. But what that means is that kind of ambition to kind of creating integrated settlements will need to link very strongly to kind of the ambitions and priorities that we've got within the growth plan. There's also in there a revised devolution framework, and this might be familiar to colleagues who, when we were looking at level 4 devolution, we were looking at kind of the powers and levers that and responsibilities that we might be able to unlock through this process, and that has been refreshed and updated. There's more in there now, covering a wide range of kind of planning skills, transport, employment support, activity. There's details set out in the paper about those particular areas, and the framework is attached to the back of the report. What I would say is that, as you said, this is just the start, so it includes a kind of a mechanism for established mayoral authorities to propose additions to that devolution framework on an annual basis. So that means that we can keep coming back and saying, actually, as we work through this process, these are the things that we need to kind of push forward and drive the growth that kind of just mentioned. There's specific details on funding levers and the integrated settlement, and obviously we were pleased in terms of announcements to kind of find out that we're in that next wave, that we'll be receiving an integrated settlement from 2026, but also in there's other detail, for example, around the use of mayoral precepts that could be used to fund kind of all combined authority functions, and also governance implications. So I think it's really important to note that when that devolution framework becomes law, it will override any existing governance arrangements that are already in place. And in mayoral strategic authorities, for example, it looks at voting procedures, which will include further detail around that as that kind of comes forward. There's also a commitment to strengthening kind of scrutiny and kind of accountability in there, which obviously links again to that kind of widening out of this across many more areas, and kind of I think we've done quite a lot of work in that area in terms of some of our scrutiny arrangements. We've moved and we were looking at kind of implementing the scrutiny protocol, which was a previous link to the level 4 devolution. So we've kind of got some really good foundations there, but that is going to be something that is really pushed forward. And also there's proposals in there for the reform of local government, and I think what's been quite, there's been a lot in the press about kind of local government reorganisation, but the white paper is also talking about kind of that public service reform element, and aligning public service boundaries, which has been a barrier in areas to kind of delivering on some of this activity. It positions strategic authorities as kind of conveners of public service reform, kind of working in partnership with our local authority colleagues. So I'll stop there on kind of some of the key highlights that are in there. I think, as you said, this is the start, and I think there's some great stuff in there, but there's more that we potentially wanting to do in terms of accelerating devolution by default. So I think in terms of our response, we're looking for kind of greater flexibility within the integrated settlement, to create the step change that we'll need, and we'll be feeding that back to government. We're using kind of all opportunities to kind of make that point, and that opportunity to kind of have increased flexibility to move resources within the integrated settlement. It's going to be really important for us in kind of delivering some of our growth ambitions. We've also got kind of greater ambition around fiscal devolution. I know you've been really heavily involved in that. We've been making the case around kind of those revenue raising powers for mayoral combined authorities again, that will help us to kind of deliver really important projects and programmes. We're also seeking kind of further information on capacity funding and the local government finance settlement, and that's really important, that in terms of being able to kind of deliver what's set out in the white paper, both the combined authority and the local authorities need that kind of long-term funding sustainability. That's really, really important in terms of actually turning this into practice and delivering, so kind of making that point. And I think also there's some areas where the framework doesn't go as far as we would like, and I think they're quite well rehearsed. We keep making those points, particularly around innovation, 16 to kind of 19 skills provision. So we'll be looking at kind of pushing on that and seeing if we can move that even further. And I think also kind of clarity over time is that we're seeking a little bit more in terms of the implementation of the bill. And what that means, because obviously we'll need to respond to this quite quickly as in terms of moving forward. Just in terms of implementation, there's a lot of work that we're already doing. I think that colleagues have been talking about already in terms of things around the local growth plan and health and work, which colleagues will be speaking about. But I think there's also kind of activity there that we need to do around kind of that further engagement with government over the coming period. Really. So there's a small window of opportunity between kind of publication of the bill and the passage. And what we're doing is using that time to kind of make the case and influence the content through the various networks and mechanisms that we've got in place. I think also the spending review is anticipated to take place in June 2025, and that's really important. particularly as it'll set budgets and spending priorities for a minimum of 3 years, really from 2026. And we need to develop our response to that, and we're doing that now, so we will be formulating a response to the spending review. But that's an opportunity to make the case for all the activity that we feel we need to kind of unlock growth. And it will also link into the kind of funding that we get through the integrated settlement. So there's a lot to do over this coming period, just preparing, obviously, for implementing the bill, and more detail will come forward over the coming weeks and months, which we'll be responding to. But yeah, I think I'll stop speaking there. There's a lot to do. I think we're well underway. We've got lots of discussions taking place with our partners about how we're going to kind of implement this moving forward.
Thank you so much. It's once in a generational opportunity, isn't it, to be able to really take power from the centre and get it right in the regions to drive growth, because you can't get growth across the whole country without getting growth in the regions led by mayors. So, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. Sarah's introduction could have been summarised in some ways, but blimey, there's a lot in here. I actually think, on closer reading, that we're actually very well placed as West Yorkshire, and I think that's because of our partnership principles. Yeah. The fact that there's the 6 of us and we travel together, and we have our disagreements, of course, from time to time, but actually we work together for the good of West Yorkshire, really. And I think the experience we've had just over the last few years will stand us in good stead. And I have to, along with Councillor Lewis, I have to echo Councillor Lamb here, because actually we're really in for an intensive period. You know, there's real pace got to be put into this. There's a lot of detail to be sorted. I think we're well placed. I think we will have to recruit and grow and do that together, actually. But it's in some ways it's very exciting, really. And I think, as I say, Mayor, we're really well placed to take the opportunity. If there was a bit more money attached to it, that would be good as well.
I think one of the strengths as well is our coterminosity of so many of our moving parts, whether that's police or health and so on, and also our combined desire to really drive change, I think, is really shared amongst partners. But also, at every opportunity, I make the case that you can't succeed with devolution if you have local authorities that are hanging by a thread. So we need that sustained long-term funding streams for local authorities as well. Anybody like to come in? Councillor Lamb and then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'm really feeling the love this morning around the table.
Don't get used to it.
Don't worry, I won't. I'm a realist. So there's lots of good things in here, and I actually echo Councillor Scullion as well to reciprocate that it kind of feels like natural next steps for us. It's going to be a much bigger disruption in some parts of the country, but because of where we are, it sort of feels building on where we've got to. One of the areas that we need more detail, but is a bit concerning, is around housing and strategic planning. And so it's really what your thoughts are around that, Mayor, and how you see using the opportunities. It's got the potential, if it's done right, and in the spirit of working that Councillor Scullion's outlined, of everybody working together in the same direction, it's also got the potential to be a huge conflict and duplication with local authorities. Hope it's the former and not the latter, but detail to come. But I just welcome your thoughts on how you see that as an opportunity and how it would work in practice.
I think, as you say, it's in development, but absolutely about additionality, that local authorities have their local plan, they know their patch. It's where I can unlock the opportunities with a strategic view across the whole of the region. So, for example, mass transit will give us an opportunity to unlock housing. We are talking in partnership with Leeds City Council around the library, and working with MHCLG on how we frame that collectively, but with that vision of economic growth and how that impacts across the whole region. So be reassured that any opportunities that we have through devolution to build more homes, that will be my priority. And it isn't about stepping on anybody's toes. Local authorities know how to do this. They need planning to work for them. so that they can get more affordable homes in particular built. But I can also make the case, for example, to Homes England, that we need to have a deeper relationship with arm's length bodies to get things done. And also I can be an advocate for developers, as you've seen at UK Reef over a number of years, being able to say West Yorkshire is the place where you should come because we have the vision. So it's a combined task, but we're all in lockstep about the size of the prize, which is to reduce those housing waiting lists, to get more people out of temporary housing, all those families growing up in temporary housing, and to get them into affordable homes. So we are definitely on a mission to deliver more affordable homes across West Yorkshire. I don't know if Sarah wants to say anything about housing. No? Okie doke. So who was next? Councillor Anderson, sorry, and then Ben.
Just
I need a pen. I'm having to remember. So, Councillor Anderson.
just as the scrutiny chair, I think this is such an exciting time to be the scrutiny chair because there's so much happening. But what my concern is, have we got the capacity to scrutinise it all effectively without needing to meet almost every single month to run scrutiny meetings to deal with things? Because at the moment we've got devolution, we've got transport, we've got mass transport, we've got bus franchising, we've got the exciting things that are going to be happening with the local growth plan. I know that when you were down at Parliament or the House of Lords or something like that last week, you were going to try and argue for increased resourcing in terms of scrutiny, because we do need to look at it without taking money away from. It's all right saying you've got an overall budget, but if you spend more on the back office overheads, there's less going in the front line. And I'm concerned that by paying commissioners, not that I like the name commissioners, by the way, because I think that's got connotations for local government that aren't necessarily always positive, but we can debate that another day. But I think with that, and how we're going to scrutinise and hold democratically into account, because I'm not advocating we should have a London-type elected people coming along, but it's how do we do that effectively, give you the reassurance, but don't tie your officers up in bureaucracy of having to report the same thing to about 4 or 5 different groups or committees. So welcome it. It's an exciting time. I want to be part of it and moving it forward. However, I am concerned whether or not we're going to have enough resource to be able to deliver it effectively without it affecting frontline, which I don't think we should do under any circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor, and certainly in front of the Select Committee, it was very evident the support that committee gets. And how many people do we have, Miles? 2. It's 2 people I think we have supporting there or thereabouts. But we are very aware of the challenge and definitely want to give scrutiny the resources that are needed. But I would just to reiterate, I also need members of that committee to also help me by putting in the time, putting in the hours, reading the papers, being across the detail. It's a team sport. So I do hear your point, as you've mentioned to me before, and we will be raising it in every opportunity with government. Ben.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up the themes actually from the finance paper as well as the resourcing and finance matters that have just been raised in relation to this paper. I think it is worth noting that there isn't currently any kind of mainstream funding settlement from central government to combined authorities, and that is something that as a combined authority network we are lobbying the government hard to achieve, because the lack of that kind of flexible revenue funding is what is the very area that we would need to use to resource the areas that have been discussed around the table today. So we'll continue to press it. And in the meantime, some of that funding is in very scarce supply, and that's why we're looking again at capitalisation, as you've just approved through the finance paper. The other point I'd make is on resourcing. If you look at our corporate risk registers, you'll see that resourcing appears repeatedly as absolutely one of the key risks to delivery across a number of our areas. We are getting, though, more sophisticated in terms of how we approach the market to find the right people, ensuring diversity in those recruitment campaigns as well, and also more efficient in terms of our internal processes. which is a challenge, but we have reduced down the average time for a recruitment process to take from about 12 months ago. It was about 100, looking at Alan because he's got his fingers on the numbers, but something like 170 days to around 100 days now. So there's something we can do to make these processes as efficient as possible. We're also looking at more sophisticated mechanisms to use private sector and other partners through those kinds of consultancy arrangements, and we're discussing that internally as well. But I'd also add as a final comment that actually the labour market is more complex, and people have, particularly post-pandemic, and particularly in the context of flexible working becoming the norm, much higher expectations about how they would work. And we as the employer need to understand the fit between how people would like to work and what our business need is. And that is an ongoing piece of work that we, along with just about every other service sector employer, is looking at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any further comments on devolution? I just think it's an exciting time to be a politician in local government because we have the opportunity to really turn around our regions in a way that we've never had. I'm so delighted that we're all on this journey together, and it's going to be quite a roller coaster, I've no doubt, but I really do feel the outcomes are going to be worth the effort. So thank you all so much. So are we happy to note the update provided on the implications of the English devolution white paper for West Yorkshire and endorse the ongoing work to implement the measures outlined in the white paper? We are. Thank you all so much. Now, as we've always discussed between us here, that to grow the economy, you need transport and skills. And that's why I am delighted that we've got to this point with the all-age careers blueprint. Improving skills and supporting good careers education is essential if we're going to grow our economy and ensure that people from all parts of our region are able to access the opportunities we're creating. An exciting step forward in ensuring everyone has access to the right support to succeed. The blueprint sets out a clear vision for a more integrated and personalised career service tailored to the needs of our local economy. And I'm really pleased with the collaboration between the combined authority, our local authority partners, employers and residents in helping us frame and shape this framework. And it's clear this approach will help connect education, training and employment opportunities for everyone, especially those who need it the most. And in fact, only last week I had dinner with the principals of all the FE colleges in West Yorkshire, signing a compact to work more closely together to identify opportunities where we can drive growth through additional skills. And they were very up for the challenge, and I'm delighted that we can get to this all-age careers point. Whatever your age, on the escalator of opportunity, you'll need access to skills. So if I could come to Councillor Lewis, just to comment on the paper, and then invite Felix Kumian-Pofa, our Director of Inclusive Economy, Skills and Culture, to provide further details. Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'm as excited as you about this paper and bringing forward the service. It's something we've all recognised we need is the clear careers and guidance service for everybody in West Yorkshire. We know that pay and productivity are lower in West Yorkshire and other parts of the country, and this is an important part, alongside many of the other pieces of work we do here to increase that. So it is a really important step forward. We know as well that the new government will be looking at reviewing the role of job centres as well, and it fits alongside that in giving people that real support. Before Felix comes in again, there's something that's come through the Business and Economy Committee. We've had a good going over from the different councillors and everybody else from the private sector and providers sat around the table to get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Felix.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And there's not much more to say, to be honest. This paper, the blueprint has been to the Economic Committee, as Councillor Lewis has just said. It was a mayoral commitment. Earlier in the year, we started working on this a little bit before then. What we've got right now in front of you with the appendices sets out what the framework is for understanding for what an all-age career service would look like. we're not starting from zero, obviously. The Combined Authority already has a career service, a schools partnership team has relationships with 181 of our schools already here. The framework here, this blueprint, allows, the work is giving us a deeper understanding of how to work with partners, the key points at which careers advice really makes a difference. And you'll see in the paper in section 3.4, there's a diagram in there that shows particularly the transitions, shows the importance of evidence, shows the importance of having quality and quality service for people, but also shows how important it is to link this to the local economy, its needs, the opportunities in it, and how we can support people to actually debunk some myths about what opportunities there are. The team, if this board is minded to approve and adopt this blueprint, will move on to developing an implementation plan. But that will link into other pieces of work that are already underway, some of which you know about and some of which the Mayor has mentioned around technical education and the West Yorkshire Promise and employability skills. The work that we're doing with on economic inactivity across the work, health and skills space. All of these matter and they fit together to support people into employment wherever they might be on the spectrum, as the Mayor suggested. So I will stop there and take any comments or questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Holdsworth.
Thank you. I really welcome this report, and I think one of the most striking things in it for me is the suggestion of intervention at primary school age, because children are very aspirational, and by the time they get to secondary school, those aspirations have quite often been kicked out of them, not intentionally, but by social expectations, parental expectations. Oh, well, why don't you go into construction? Your dad's always enjoyed it. Those sorts of things. And to try and encourage younger people to think in a more broader sense is really, really to be welcomed. I have raised this question with Felix earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate that having worked, for about 40 years in careers across the sector, from secondary schools up to universities, one of the key problems in finding work experience placements outside large organisations is the reluctance of small and medium-sized employers to take people on the basis that in order to give them a relevant experience, they would need to deploy staff away from their normal jobs to help and supervise the work experience person, irrespective of their age. And I wondered if there was any funding that's being considered to encourage the small and medium-sized employer to offer appropriate work experience to make this blueprint really work for all ages and all demographics of people across West Yorkshire. Thank you.
Councillor Holdsworth, I could not agree more with you that for so many kids, it's who you know. And if you've got work experience on your CV, you're more likely to get an interview. It's something that the Mayor's raised with the Minister, Jackie Smith, on a call, I think it was yesterday, and she took it away as an action for government to look at how we can encourage businesses to offer work experience. But your point is well made that the majority of our businesses are SMEs, and it may be something that we could work with those members of the Fair Work Charter to support them as maybe a localised pilot to offer work experience. But over to you, Felix, because it is absolutely a game changer for so many youngsters, particularly working class kids who don't have access, whose parents may not even be working and they can't use friends and family.
Thank you,
Felix.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you said, really, really valid points, very strong points. I think there's something for us to learn in some of the work that we already have kicked off. There are many partners doing really good work here, and we need to work with them and not to disrupt what they already are putting in place, but to work and realize what we can scale. And if there are any new ideas we bring on board, their head partnership and some of the other partners out there are doing some amazing work. You are right that too many times when it comes to work experience, the whom you know gets in the way a lot, and there are challenges there for many people who are not that well connected. That is partly why we feel it's important for us to start engagement early. It's where the primary school thing comes in, to make sure that aspirations remain as high as possible for as long as possible, and that we are there to support, or we work with partners to support everybody, whether they are at the beginning, middle, or towards the end of their careers, to make the right decisions. The blueprint in front of you focuses on the importance of transitions, when people are moving from primary to secondary, or GCSE to college or A-level. At those transition points, people are making decisions. With what information are they making that decision? Who is the main influence? And how can we support that? There are lessons for us to learn from some of the programs we've done before. If you look at Multiply, for example, which was about numeracy, we did not simply go in to teach people maths. We actually worked with their parents. We worked with parents to even look at how they do their household budgets, and subtly bring in the numeracy bit on the back of that. There are different ways of doing some of these things, and we are definitely looking at that. Final point I'll make is in the local growth plan, we did make a commitment that we will support everybody, particularly young people, to have the employer encounters that they need by the time they leave their youth, so they are ready for employment. And the team is already working on this, so we'll come back to you with more detail.
Thank you so much. And also to reassure you that, particularly on our green skills task force recommendations, that we go to primary schools to talk to youngsters about what a green job is, what their future plans are. So to go to primary rather than just secondary, because often those decisions are made already. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up from what Councillor Holdsworth was saying, and actually put a small business perspective onto it. And the barrier actually is the system is geared up to engage with big business. It is not in any way geared up to engage with small business. And I've lived experience of it, know many others, where you desperately want to give opportunities to young people for work placement, sort of things you provide. Actually getting someone to answer the phone or reply to an email, it feels frequently that it's much easier for them to meet their KPIs by dealing with a small number of large companies who have an HR department and people that can deal with all the paperwork and everything, where when it's a small business, it's one person who's also doing their day job and is the HR department, and everything else and the bureaucracy is often what gets in the way. And I think that's something we have to factor into these things, of really actually understanding what small business needs to be able to provide these opportunities, and making it as easy as possible to provide the opportunities, not having huge forms to fill in and lots of bureaucracy to engage with, because that's the bit that's off-putting. And also I personally have found the colleges don't engage well with small business, because it seems like there are a lot of us and it's a lot of phone calls and conversations to have, and they just don't have the time and capacity, so they tend to focus on one big company with an HR department because they can provide a lot of opportunities, rather than thousands and thousands of small businesses who might be able to provide one each, if that makes sense. So I totally agree with what you say, but I think there's a job of work to do to make it work with small business.
Thank you. Felix.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, really strong points there. Just a couple of comments, if I may. One is on the final point you made around colleges, the compact that the Mayor referred to earlier on specifically refers to how colleges engage with employers and how we can work together to make that better, how we can ensure that that is woven into all their provision as much as possible. It's something that we are fully aware of, and we'll keep working on that, but we recognize the point that you're making. The second point I wanted to make was that there's probably something for us to learn from the ongoing SME graduate scheme that we have. This is focused entirely, exclusive, as the name says, on SMEs and supporting small and medium-sized businesses to recruit graduates. And we realized in designing this that some of the key points that you made, kept coming through: the resource required for SMEs to engage, how much time they need to dedicate to bring a new recruit up to the right level. And so the program that we've set up is to provide that support to businesses, but also to the graduates, to make sure that they feel part of a network, part of a movement. They're not left on their own once they've got a job, and they get all the support they need to remain in work, to enjoy it, and when the time comes for them to move on, they have the right information to do that. We'll see how that project goes. It's only a few months old, but there are lessons there for us to learn about what we can transfer from that into a knowledge career service.
Thank you so much. Any further comments? No, thank you. Well, thank you so much for the work on this piece of work, because it's going to be a game changer. So are members happy to approve the adoption of the West Yorkshire All-Age Careers Blueprint? We will find another snappier title for it at Appendix 1, which will guide the design and implementation of an integrated careers and employment system for all residents in the region. We are happy to do that, aren't we? Good stuff. Thank you all. Moving on, item 10, project approvals. This first approval report relates to the West Yorkshire and York broadband gain share. I'll ask Felix, our Director of Inclusive Economy, Skills and Culture, to take us through the recommendations on that item first, please. Could you speak into your mic, please?
Sorry, it's bound to catch me out at some point. A few years ago, the local authorities and the Combined Authority contributed to set up a scheme to support the rollout of fast broadband connection across West Yorkshire. Part of this was a clawback. The terms in it include a clawback mechanism where, if take-up reached a certain level, funding then returned to the public sector. Up till this point, just over £6 million has come back in, and the paper you have in front of you is seeking your approval to delegate to the Chief Exec for 2.7 million of the 6.3 million pounds to be returned to all the partners, all the local authorities, the 6 partners that contributed to this at the beginning, so everybody gets their money back. The remainder, the paper is seeking delegation to the Director of Inclusive Economy, Skills and Culture, which happens to be me, to work with partners to disperse that in accordance with the digital blueprint that you have already approved here. So we have some digital projects that are already underway, and there are other proposals to be considered, and this allows us to make those decisions quickly. The final point to make is that there is more funding coming in slowly as take-up increases. So we'll come back to report to you on how that is going and how that money should be spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it's a good news story because it's money for local authorities, which is always welcome, isn't it? Are we happy to approve, or do we have any comments? Any comments? No. So are we happy to approve the delegation authority recommended for progression through the assurance process and approval of the funding? We are. Very enthusiastic from local authority partners there. Moving on, the project approval report provides details of 4 schemes recommended to progress through the assurance process, together with the delegation of approval of 1 scheme to the CA's Chief Executive. Can I invite Simon Pope, our new Director of Transport Capital Programmes, your first meeting, and I know that you joined us earlier this month and have definitely hit the ground running. So thank you so much. There are definitely too many Simons in this organisation. But Simon P., please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and apologies for the name confusion. As you say, there were 4 schemes within the Transport Capital Programme that we're looking for recommendations, or we're providing recommendations for the Combined Authority to approve this month. There's obviously more details set out in the paper, but I'll talk you briefly through the key points in relation to those 4 schemes now. First scheme is the Rail Accessibility Package, where we are recommending the Combined Authority approves the scheme, proceeds through decision point 2, which is strategic outline case, and work commences on activity 4, which is full business case. We're also recommending the release of £1.7 million in development funding to progress the next stages of the work, and that future approvals are made in accordance with the assurance pathway and approval route that are outlined in the papers. Briefly, the scheme seeks to deliver step-free access at Guiseley Railway Station to make it safer, more attractive and easier for all rail users, particularly those with mobility impairments and those with caring responsibilities. The scheme is going to involve delivery of a large-scale intervention comprising a new footbridge and associated lift access to both platforms. The Combined Authority previously submitted a bid to funding to the DfT's Access for All programme, where we're seeking to provide step-free access at 7 locations across West Yorkshire, with CRSTS funding being used as our local match component. Unfortunately, that bid was unsuccessful, and thus it's proposed that the CRSTS match component is redirected to fund a single large-scale intervention in isolation. Guiseley has been selected as the most suitable location for that investment because it's the location where delivery can be achieved within the March 2027 CRSTS funding window. The indicative cost for the scheme is circa £10 million, and FBC for the scheme is programmed for May 2026, at which point a further decision will be requested from the Combined Authority to proceed into delivery, with construction completion envisaged for February 2027. I'll take the next 2 schemes together as both are active travel schemes seeking funding through Tranche 4 of the Active Travel Fund. The first is upgrade to the Huddersfield Broad Canal towpath between Cooper Bridge and Huddersfield. The second is upgrade to the Huddersfield Narrow Canal towpath between the Standage Tunnel, Marsden and Slowett. Here we're recommending the Combined Authority approves both schemes proceed through decision points 2 to 4, business justification case, and work commences on activity 5, delivery. We're also recommending that the Combined Authority approves release of funding to the total of £1.8 million for the Broad Canal and £1.5 million for the Narrow Canal, and that future approvals are made in accordance with the assurance pathway and the approval route set out in the papers. Both schemes seek to increase active travel trips and abstract commuter journeys from parallel highway routes. The total cost of both schemes has increased from previous estimates that were set out in the programme level strategic outline case for Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 by £458,000 and £539,000 respectively, due to the identification of unforeseen issues on site that have increased the scope of works that's going to be required. However, Active Travel England have provided written confirmation to us that they will provide the additional funding to cover this increase in full, and therefore, subject to approval by the Combined Authority, both schemes would start on site in April, with completion due for September of this year. Fourthly, we have the Calderdale bus hotspots enforcement scheme. This forms part of our CRSTS programme, where we're recommending the Combined Authority approves the scheme proceeds through decision points 2 to 4, business justification case, and work commences on activity 5, delivery. We're also recommending the Combined Authority approves release of funding to the total of £1.3 million for the scheme, and that future approvals are made in accordance with the assurance pathway and approval route outlined in the papers. The scheme will enable Calderdale Council to enforce against violations of bus lane and bus gate restrictions that are currently causing bus delays and safety issues for other permitted users, including cyclists. A total of 7 enforcement sites have been identified, 5 at existing bus lane and bus gate locations, and 2 that are in development as part of separate capital schemes. Enforcement is currently undertaken by the police, but due to resource constraints, this is shown to be unviable in the longer term. So the scheme will introduce automatic number plate recognition cameras in 7 locations and introduce the associated back office system to issue penalty charge notices to drivers caught infringing restrictions. Ongoing funding of the scheme will be met through revenue generated from the penalty charge notices within the first year, with Calderdale Council underwriting any shortfalls in operating costs. The scheme is expected to reduce violations by 85% within its first year, making bus journeys quicker and more reliable, whilst improving safety for cyclists. And so as such, it's considered an important enabling component that contributes towards our bus reform programme. It also brings the ability to enforce restrictions in Calderdale into line with similar capability that already exists in Bradford, Leeds and Wakefield. So subject to approval by the Combined Authority, the scheme will commence delivery in August of this year, with completion programmed for January 2026. Finally, I just draw members' attention to the delegated decisions taken by the Chief Executive and the Executive Director for Transport set out in the papers in relation to the Silsden to Kildick Canal towpath scheme, the Leeds Bradford Airport Parkway scheme, the Bradford Forster Square Station Gateway scheme, and the Huddersfield Bus Station Canopy and Public Realm scheme. Happy to take any questions in relation to those schemes or the 4 schemes that we're seeking CA approval, further to what I briefly summarised.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. A couple of things I'd like to just mention. Accessibility to stations. We're in a parlour state here in West Yorkshire, and I think it's 72% of our stations don't have accessible maybe Simon, you can give me that statistic, but it don't have accessibility. It's just not right. We've got to make sure that all our transport offer is accessible to every citizen. So it was disappointing that we didn't get that bid, but that we just went ahead, I think is really important for us to show that we find this really important and it is a big priority. And I know that we've been trying to work with Northern on train stations, etc. So it's a matter that is a priority for us, and particularly when it comes to our development of mass transit and bus franchising, we will have that as a priority as we design the network going forward. Just one thing, I love the canals, and certainly as an offer for active travel, it's unique to the north and to our region, and it's great that we can make them accessible to all users. The funding ask has gone up a bit. Could you, Simon, just talk me through what the unexpected things that you found there that have meant that it's increased as it has?
Yes, thank you, Matt. The original cost for the canal schemes was developed at the time of the programme level strategic outline case that we submitted to Active Travel England to secure the Tranche 4 funding. That was based on a high level estimate of cost per kilometre for improvements to the towpath. We've seen undertaking development works, we found that further works were required to the canal wall due to the quality of that wall, so that's resulted in the increase in costs that have been identified. We're obviously looking to recycle some of that knowledge from this latest Tranche 4 submission into future potential tranches as part of the Active Travel Fund going forward.
Do you work with Canal and River Trust on that? Because obviously that's their remit as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. They're a key stakeholder as part of those proposals.
Okay, thank you. So can I ask Councillor Morley?
Thank you, Mayor. Tongue in cheek, I think you find yourself lucky that you wasn't successful for the Access for All funding. As somebody that was for one of our Pontefract stations, successful in the early part of 2020, we're still waiting for that to even start, that Access for All at Pontefract Monkhill station, I believe, which has been crying out for accessibility improvements for years and years and years. So at least you've got guys who are up and running, where we're still waiting for them improvements. And I think there's a number of stations across the region like that. You do make a valid point, though, and you are right about our rivers and canals and off-road cycling. We was very successful, and it has been successful. The Castleford-Wakefield Greenway, just over the water there from Councillor Lewis's ward in Castleford. People complain that some, these schemes are a waste of money, but the amount of families and people cycling on there that you see for getting to work, but also for pleasure, is unbelievable. So I'm a massive advocate of them, and I just want we should do that with all our rivers all over the country.
Thank you. Hear to that. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, just again on the accessibility point, this did come up. It's come up a few times actually at transport committees. This as well. Particularly Councillor Chris Steele is very keen on the fact that even when we make it access step free, there's still difficulty getting on trains. And I just made me think actually. That obviously, there's a couple. There's Northern and TP are both now looking at rolling stock. We should make sure that we feed into that and make sure they are looking at this seriously, because all this work that we're doing on stations needs to be reflected right through the journey and not just at the station. So I think it's probably worth us picking up from a Transport Committee point of view that rolling stock purchase. Thank you.
Absolutely, and if we're looking to also integrate rail into our integrated plan, like an overground, that is also important for us going forward as well, that we make sure that it's accessible for all. Any further comments, Ben?
Just a comment on process, if I may. On page 295, we talk about the value for money and the benefit cost ratio for some of these schemes, and you'll see, and it's not just in this paper, some of the projects do drop below a benefit cost ratio of 1, and nevertheless we still recommend those schemes for approval. And you might legitimately ask the question why that is the case, and the paper sets out why that is the case in terms of the very narrow range of factors that are formally taken into account through following central government processes, and enhanced by cost inflation on the cost side without consummate changes on the benefit side. And there's some technical reasons why that isn't fully kind of presented in a fair way. So what we're looking to do is take a look at what does benefit cost ratio and value for money assessments look like in a sensible way amongst the schemes, particularly because we are increasingly taking forward the kinds of schemes that are not straight highway schemes, which don't, and therefore don't score quite so highly in benefit cost ratio terms. So I just wanted to flag that, lest anyone thinks we're just ignoring some of these figures that otherwise would be questionable. Thank you.
Thank you, very helpful. Councillor Holsworth.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about the bus hotspots in Calderdale. The point at 4.43 on page 295 says that the bus gates and the number plate recognition scheme will enable more journeys to be taken by bus. I've just got a question mark about that because the bus service between Stainland and West Vale was axed. And the bus services that do exist between the rural areas of Greetons and Stainland have been reduced. Now, I accept that by the introduction of the franchising scheme, I would hope that this will definitely improve. But I question the extrapolation of more bus journeys being taken with the introduction of the number plate recognition.
Councillor Scullion, I was going to go to Simon, but please go for it.
Simon can probably give a more technical answer. And Councillor Holsworth is absolutely right. She's absolutely right. You know, shocking, as in Wakefield and in the other districts, cutting of services as well as a diminution in services, a reduction in services. And she's right to ask to have spelled out this particular scheme, which is actually in the administration's forthcoming budget process as well. And I'd be very happy to go into enormous detail about each of the 7 locations. But one of the ongoing discussions we have with the bus companies is them saying, well, we can't afford to carry on doing this route because there are too many delays. We can't get the buses into the bus stations, turned around, or whatever destination. And one of them is to do with the violations in terms of the bus lanes. So as part of that ongoing dialogue, one of the things that we are looking at, as other authorities have looked at, is the question of the bus lanes and the bus gates as a way of actually not just reducing but eliminating the bus company's excuse that they are getting delayed and therefore they can't run those services. So it's a correlation rather than causality, but it's a really important part of our ongoing discussion with bus companies in terms of reliability, speed, and the services that people really need. But happy to go into more detail, so.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so much. Did you want to add anything, Simon P?
I think Councillor Scullion's explained very eloquently. It's just one piece in the jigsaw, and obviously we need to make sure we get everything right for service delivery.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Just out of sheer curiosity, who has the responsibility of the ANPR cameras then? Is it the combined authority or is it the local council?
So it will be the Calderdale Council that will be taking responsibility for maintenance and upkeep of those cameras.
Okie doke, thank you so much. I'm hoping to finish this meeting at 1, so thank you for your speedy approach to the last few items. So can we approve that the 4 schemes recommended for progression through the assurance process and approve the funding? So the rail accessibility package, step-free access Guiseley Station, approved. Huddersfield Broad Canal, Aspley Basin to Cooper Bridge towpath resurfacing. Thank you. Huddersfield Narrow Canal Phase 3. Super. Calderdale bus hotspots. Thank you. And they sound like fun, those hotspots in Calderdale. So thank you so much for your support. So moving on to item 11, governance arrangements and amendments to standing orders. This relates to the CA's key governance arrangements, proposed amendments to the CA's contract standing orders. Can I ask Carolyn Norris, Assistant Director for Legal Governance and Compliance, to take us through the recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. I shall do that, and I shall note your wise words of our finishing time, so I shall be succinct and assume a lot of the report is taken as read. This report deals with 4 separate matters. There are 3 matters on which we are seeking the approval of the combined authority, and a 4th here is for noting. They are unrelated matters, but they are brought together in one report for conciseness, so I shall take them separately. The first matter here relates to our recently established employment panel, and at the last combined authority meeting you agreed the principle of having co-optees to that panel should they be needed in addition to the FRCC members. This report brings forward those nominations from each of your councils for approval as co-optees to that. So I'm hoping that is very straightforward, Mayor. The second matter here is a substantive matter in its own right, and that is seeking approval to a revised version to our contract standing orders. Our contract standing orders are effectively the regulatory regime that covers all our procurement across the combined authority, across all projects and programmes. So it's an absolutely key piece of the governance jigsaw in terms of that procurement process, which, as we know, is fundamental to the speed and the ability at which we can deliver on your objectives. The CSOs have been updated in two separate ways. One is to reflect the changes coming in from the Procurement Act next month, which in itself brings a lot of positive change nationally in terms of procurement. And secondly, the commercial team have taken the opportunity to actually look, in addition to that, to some of our internal processes and to look at where we can actually streamline those and improve those. So there are a range of changes across the contract standing orders, which are there at Appendix 2, to address both of those. Just very briefly, some of the key areas of change here, and some of these do stem from the national change in legislation. But we've looked to, the Procurement Act introduces policies to remove barriers for SMEs in terms of their access to the market, and those have been reflected and taken through in terms of some of the changes to our own contract standing orders. In addition, we've put enhanced provisions in relation to social value element of procurement in our contracts of over 60,000. So we've broadened the scope of contracts to which social value element would be relevant. Through the national changes introduces greater flexibility. So it moves the number of procedures to 2 procedures, open and competitive. The competitive flexible procedure allows that authorities to have some flexibility in terms of that particular type of procurement. If it's for something particularly innovative or different, there's an opportunity to put stages and procedures in there to reflect that. There is also greater transparency and openness in terms of there will be there's a new national procurement review unit, but also a national platform on which will track contract performance information. So for the first time, local authorities will be required to upload details onto that. But whereas I think there's, historically there have been issues where you've had poor performance from a contract before, but you're limited in terms of the extent to which you can have regard to that in terms of future tendering. This really opens up that transparency in terms of recording this nationally, which will help hopefully incentivise suppliers and in terms of their performance, but also will give the teeth to combined authorities and local authorities in terms of future procurement. There's also strengthening of the conflict of interest processes, so much more transparency around that. And one of the changes we're making in terms of our internal procedures is moving the point of approval, which currently sits towards the end of the process. So when it comes forward to a senior officer for sign-off, it's already so far down the line. That is being flipped to the start of the process. So at that formative stage in terms of, okay, who do we need to engage with? Where do we need to procure? What can we do internally? That senior sign-off happens at an earlier stage. So I think there's a lot of really positive changes in that. It is supported by training that will be rolled out internally because, of course, this, it's that officers need to know what the art of the possible is. Our commercial team are keen to sort of be on the forefront with that and working really closely and providing that commercial advice and input at an earlier stage in the process. So it will be kept under review as we do with our policies, and we have the annual meeting coming up in the summer. If there are further changes that we need to make, we will do that at that stage. So I'll keep going at this point, but very happy to take any questions on that, if that's okay, Mayor.
Yeah, I think keep going and then we can come back to each item.
The third item relates to some, I suppose, our response to a change that at a national level, and it's a little bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, I think, in terms of the reference here to a new Combined Authorities Adult Education Functions Amendment Order. But what it boils down to, and this is at para 314 onwards, is that nationally there have been some new types of technical qualifications approved, which we could fund using our Adult Skills Fund budget. But we are restricted from doing so, having the power to do so, because it's not within the current orders. So the government are having to introduce a national order to simply give combined authorities the power to apply funding to those new technical qualifications in the same way as they do for other things. So they are seeking the consent of the combined authority, also for each of the local authorities as well. So I'm sure your monitoring officers will be having conversations with you. But this is seeking, because of the timing of it, we are asking here for your approval in principle, and that the Chief Executive has the authority to give the final, to give the consent once we see the final version of that order in consultation with the Mayor. But it's an enabling power rather than a duty or a burden on the CA. And then finally, the fourth point is to highlight that the MHCLG has put out a consultation on standards and code of conduct in terms of members' complaints against members. That is a national consultation. Unfortunately, the timing of it has meant that we haven't been able to bring a proposed draft response to this meeting, and it closes before our next CA meeting. So we are drawing it to your attention, and we'll be writing out to each member to say, if you want to feed back to me, I will do a response as monitoring officer for the CA, but to make you aware. But I'm sure members are aware, because obviously this affects you in terms of your own authorities as well. So thank you, Mayor. That's a slight canter through, but I am very happy to go back and take questions.
Thank you so much. Has anybody got any comments on what we've heard so far? No? Thank you so much for that work. And I think things are going to be changing as well. We're going to be needing potentially other levers from government that might also necessitate further standing order changes. But thank you. Okie doke. Moving on to the next item. Oh no, are we happy to approve the co-option, of the nominees to the employment panel? We are, thank you. Approve the revised contract standing orders. Thank you. Approve in principle the consent to the creation of an adult education order and delegate authority to the CA's Chief Executive in consultation with myself, the final draft of the order. We are. Note the consultation on the framework for standards and code of conduct. Super, thank you. Obviously need my lunch, fading fast in the chair. Item 12, minutes for information. This provides members with details of the minutes of the committees and notes informal meetings of members, and have been published on the website since the last meeting. But before we go, may I just say a few words to recognise Alan Rees, our Chief Operating Officer, as he prepares to leave the CA in March after 6 fantastic years, and our loss is Kim McGuinness's gain. It's your final CA meeting, Alan, and I want to thank you for the huge contribution you've made during your time with us. You've helped secure the mayoral devolution deal, bringing billions of pounds of funding to West Yorkshire. You led on our response with others to the pandemic. You've driven forward major initiatives like mass transit and bus franchising, and your contribution has been instrumental in shaping our region's future. You brought in the police and crime functions, not an easy thing to do, and your passion and determination around equity, diversity and inclusion have left a lasting legacy for my organisation and our organisation, and I had a genuine ally in my desire to see a more diverse combined authority. Alan is the first permanent Chief Operating Officer. Our Chief Executive will be reviewing the role before recruitment begins, with temporary arrangements to ensure continuity. A real loss for us, but incredible dedication and energy, and be felt long after you move on. behalf of everyone here, I want to thank you, Alan, for everything that you've done. Public service is not a given, and you've really approached your job with commitment, energy, creativity and flair. And I also want to applaud you for your commitment to amateur dramatics, because that was a real point of interest for me, that you and your family love amateur dramatics, and I'm sure you'll find an Amdram company up in Durham as well. So we all really wish you the best for the next chapter. Thank you, Alan. So thank you everybody for your attendance, and the next meeting is 27th of February, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you.